Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Bridging Impact Podcast, the podcast that is passing wisdom to the next generation of athletes, coaches, and parents to transform leaders on and off the court. And in today's episode, we got a wonderful one today. Actually, so wonderful. Alyssa Amaral, the founder of Project Wonder in Modesto, is on today with us. And in this episode, she talks about how she's created an amazing product where she had a great summer full of athletes in the gym, in a beautiful CrossFit gym, and talking about entrepreneurship, being a mom, balancing it all, finding her own strengths and gifts, and giving that back. So without further ado, there's so much wisdom, so much inspiration, and a lot of education for how we can make an impact for our athletes and our young people, and how to be better leaders in this episode. Let's dive in, yo. Let's go. Without further ado, welcome to the Bridging Impact Podcast. Alyssa, it's great to have you on. I'm excited to have our conversation today about Project Wonder. So welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
I know we have a lot to dive into, but let's start here. This is where we start with all of our podcasts. How has sports and specifically basketball made an impact on your life?
As a child, basketball was a huge impact in my life. It was the one constant. You have practice these days. It was the one constant. It was something that was measurable and fair. Like when I think about, because a lot of my job is reflecting on what sports did for me. That's, I developed this sports-based empowerment program. And so my answer is maybe more like specific than most people. But there are measurable results that reflect your work ethic, that reflect where you're at mentally today. And I saw that as a youth. If I had a hard day at home because there was some hard things at home, if my mind wasn't in it, you saw that in the game. If I shot 100 extra free throws, 3 times a week, it showed in the game. Like there was you couldn't cheat that success. It was honest and measurable.
I like that. I honestly haven't heard that on here before, talking about how the impact was about, kind of being measurable and fair. And you just talked about how the results happen from your work that you put in, right? The 100 free throws being consistent. But could you continue to expand on how, basketball teaching you that lesson about being, the importance of measurable and fair has now kind of come into your life as a leader of, young people and empowering young people?
Yeah. Just recently I was driving, probably 3 months ago, I was driving, and being an entrepreneur now, I have mentors, and that's something else I received from basketball, right? The power of having a good coach versus a coach that's, tearing you down, for lack of more kind words for that type of coach. And, you understand, if you're a coachable person, you want to be coached, and you fear being stagnant. And so as an entrepreneur, I'm driving home, and that's when all my thoughts, are just kind of floating unstructured. And I'm like, I need to be back in school. I need grades. Like I need grades. I have mentors that give me, feedback and advice, and they're doing better than I am. And so I value that, right, in whatever area, but I need grades. And, I think that's something like specifically is that type of feedback that I crave as an entrepreneur. And to say that is, again, going back into measurable results and being able to measure those myself. And if I feel like I'm not as far as I want to be, I have to look back on my habits the past month or so, right, or the past week or so. And so there's a lot of value as an entrepreneur in taking on, I think, the work ethic and the accountability, because I answer to myself at the end of the day.
Right. No, that's a really interesting point. And I'm actually curious, as an entrepreneur, like what you kind of measure yourself and your program on, because I have a similar thing, right? Like obviously, dollars have to come into it, because we have to make sure that that's like the blood of our organization. If we don't have enough blood, then we're not going to be an operating organization. But at the same time, like we're both in it for impact, right? So I'm curious, how do you measure impact, or if that's, something you measure, or what else you measure? I just love to learn more.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for that. I was standing in the middle of, one of our Project Wonder Kids CrossFit sessions. And we had a great turnout over our summer program. And there were probably 25 kids on the floor. And we're in this beautiful CrossFit gym. We're in the top of the line CrossFit gym, like where I would imagine I would want to be. And there are these kids working their tails off in a program that I've designed, and it's like these coaches that I've been coaching. And I get emotional, and it's moments like that I'm like, okay, we're on track. And it's utter disbelief that I've gotten there. Doesn't matter how much you believe in yourself. When something that you started as a dream or like kind of an inkling, and you're like, oh my gosh, I am so far from this even being a straight line, right? And then you just stand in that, you're on the right track. And so there are so many days and nights that are like scary, and they seem like you haven't done enough in a day, right? Maybe I've only sent out 3 emails and had one real good phone conversation. Or to be honest with you, Coach Furtado, I love that you're Furtado. I'm Portuguese, right?
Okay, same. Yep.
Yeah. So Furtado, I'm like, he's a Furtado. Okay. Anyway, so there are so many unknowns, and there are so many days where I'm like, what did I even get done today? And to be honest with you, there are some days where like I'm not in the space to be able to be productive in whatever lane. So I just have to like get some posts out on social media, right? I just need to make sure that my programming is good for tomorrow. And that's my capacity. And I have 2 kids. I'm a single mom with 2 kids. So some days that's just my capacity. So the longest way ever to answer your question, I apologize. I have milestones and I have dreams, Now my next dream is to be standing on the sidelines of our first girls flag football weekend, right? And then that is going to be like, holy crap. Okay. There are little landmarks, to that. I have my first real board meeting. Our program is a nonprofit. And so that's a whole nother animal that I've had to learn how. I had no plans on running any type of nonprofit organization.
I get that, yeah.
I am not an administrative soul. I didn't even know what that word meant until 4 years ago, right? Until I started this. Right. So, there are these little obstacles, but that's the big goal. So it's breaking it down, just like anything else, right? You break down your game. I love watching your videos because, basketball is this whole big concept, and you're like, gosh, I have to be an athlete and I have to, have all these components, when really there are basics that make you solid, right? And that brings confidence. And so my basics are, big milestones, and then just breaking those down into, actionable, measurable things, right? So what can I do today to get me closer tomorrow? So
I like that a lot, because as someone who's also a visionary and entrepreneur and has, big goals, right? I feel I feel the same way, where I feel like if I don't have a productive day, or even today where I'm a little more tired, I'm not as on point as I feel like I could be, right? I have these feelings of I'm not doing enough, kind of like you mentioned. And then I also think about, I just ran my first ever summer camps this summer, and got the opportunity to serve around over 25 kids over the course of the summer. And so that's something that I'm proud of too, and want to celebrate that. So it's a both thing, and recognizing those milestones is a good way, at least for me, and I'm sure for the audience, for coaches, and it's a good way to also teach athletes. And when we're thinking about teaching athletes, I know we're talking about Project Wonder, but I haven't even given you the opportunity to share more about the mission and why you started that, and what you all have been up to this summer, if you want to talk more about the summer camps.
Thank you. I get ahead of myself. I feel like everyone in my family, in my circle, knows I'm going to have my mission statement on my gravestone when I die. So I forget that not everyone knows what I'm doing at Project Wonder. So Project Wonder initially started as wanting to create a safe place for kids to show up the way they are, period. And it was literally that simple. It was I was at that time of inspiration. I was the head coach at Orange Theory Fitness. So I was a fitness coach. I spent a lot of time using my words on a microphone to not only instruct people like in, to keep them safe, like, in a pretty serious way. Through fitness, they put so many people in one studio. Sometimes there's 36 people and me on a microphone. So the words that I know, but the words that you use are like magic, or, one way or the other. So, but I also learned how to inspire, how to empower people on the treadmill. I grew up a really overweight kid. And so like running was so hard for me. And, that's kind of a piece of basketball too. I lost a lot of weight when I was 15 and just all of a sudden became like a really good basketball player. I had been playing, but I was just a little slow. And, but on the microphone, I could really like speak life into people, right? Like just really speak hope. And they finished, and then the way they felt when they came out, it's like, I have that power just to like spend time and speak into these people, adults that I thought they were incredible on their own, and like, but they needed my help. And so from wanting to create a safe place for kids and then seeing like this gift that I felt I had, Project Wonder, it all started to come together. And kind of like I said, when something becomes a dream, how the hell do you make it into like a linear like plan, right? And it was just kind of taking where God had me at the moment. So I had a dear friend who had asked me if her daughter could actually come to Orange Theory because she didn't want to be in a swimsuit the entire summer. And that broke her mom's heart, like to see, right? Her daughter wouldn't wear a swimsuit. She was like 11. And she's like, can Miley come in and you just speak life like you do to us to her? Well, she didn't know I had already had this inspiration on my heart. And I was like, why don't you give me a couple of weeks? I knew Miley couldn't come because she was too young. You had to be 14. But I'm like, if you can give me a couple of weeks, I think I'm like onto something. And so Project Wonder became a boot camp. 2 days a week, we worked out at Davis Park in Modesto. And then 1 day a week, we just met in my apartment and we talked, we spoke. In my 20s, I ran a group home, and my degree is in psychology. And so I just took, again, like these little pieces God gives you, right? And it developed. And we did it that way. We started with 4 girls. It was like my best friend's kids that trusted me with their children for like my experiment. And we talked about bullying and body image. And it started with just girls because that's like what I had available. And it grew. And then through COVID, the idea that our kids just need a safe place to like come together, that took off again, right? Like we were okay where we were at. And for like 6 months, I found a location. It was all privately funded. So everything happened kind of slow. I would coach over here and raise money, raising my kids too, and then try to grow as I could. But during COVID, I actually was battling some health, like physical health stuff. And so I had to slow it down. And so we put on a few events. We took a whole break for like 6 months and just put on I remember we did like a 4th of July celebration and like a spring, like get together. And I used that time off to really develop our vision. And our vision is to empower young athletes and develop character in young athletes. And because business-wise, you have to pick a niche, right? It's smart to pick a niche. You're much more like focused than I am, and I admire that. But with my goal and my developing a curriculum that can be repeated and molded, our goal is to reach as many athletes as possible. And while we're in the CrossFit space, and I develop CrossFit like workout templates, it's our empowerment curriculum that we've developed that really sets us apart. And it's our coaches program. We have a program where we coach our coaches it's called relationship-based coaching. So it teaches our coaching how to be available to their athletes, not just be there because someone needs to know CPR and someone needs to teach form. But so what we're doing at Project Wonder is we're partnering with sports organizations and developing curriculums alongside of these organizations. We have templates, we have a curriculum overall, but we're partnering with these organizations to bring empowerment to athletes, specifically athletes. And that ties into my loving sports. I was a swimmer and a basketball player growing up, but I was really overweight. And when I lost a bunch of weight, very strict on Weight Watchers, I was like, I should have been a spokesperson. They owe me money. Weight Watchers, if you're watching, hit me up. But I lost like 100 pounds in like a year. And then all of a sudden, I was a really good basketball player. All of a sudden, people expected different things from me because my confidence shot up. And then it was like a really scary place. Like imagine, I don't know, like shooting up on an elevator and you're on a really small platform because you have no foundation under that, right? To like work off of. So all of a sudden I was offered multiple college scholarships. And I was not emotionally or mentally well or available enough to manage that. And so it's really it's taken 4 years, and kind of like when we went back and you said like being a visionary, it's a really scary thing to be a visionary. It's rocking if you're like full of faith and like you have a ton of support behind you, but it still has such scary moments because I spent 4 years really not knowing where I was going with this, spending lots of money, making a dollar stretch more than I needed to if I were just in a career that like my degree allowed, but the vision is finally there, and like the curriculum is there, and we're moving into our second CrossFit gym here in the next couple of months. And we had a really cool program over the summer in Arkansas because we had a mom who like believed in what we were doing, and when they moved, they took it out there. And so it's really, the word empowerment, I think, to be honest and blunt, is overused. And I think that I'm almost kind of numb to it. And I think we as a society is like, oh yeah, empowerment. Ooh, like we're all equal or whatever it means to everyone. But I feel like we're becoming callous to it. But really it's empowering young athletes so that whatever field you're on, whatever classroom you're in, whatever office building you're in, you're just able to stand in like who you are off of the court, right? Like what are your values? What are your strengths to the team? I don't care if you're 90% at the free throw line. If you're not loving on your teammates and you're not able to help people pick their chin up who's not 9 for 10 on the free throw line, I'm good, man. Like I'm good. And how is that attitude reflecting off the court, right? And it's not doing our kids any favors to have attitudes and mindsets like that. So we're empowering young athletes. I'm giving you the longest answers in the world today. I hope that's okay, Coach Furtado.
No, I love it. And I have a lot of questions, but my original question was just, you said words are magic, and you mentioned that their words are magic both ways. And I feel like what you were talking about, sharing about your story around how you're one of the gifts that you have been given is the ability to speak life into people. And I feel like I have a similar gift, and I'm just curious, just as someone who wants to learn right now, I would love to hear, how that foundation for words are magic has really transformed your programming and your curriculum and coaching the coaches, because that's something that I have aspirations of as well. And the relationship base it's so much more important than teaching someone how to shoot. Yeah. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say I could care less about how to shoot, because that's important too, but what's way more important is to have a positive relationship with an athlete, so they can trust me, so that way I can, speak life into them, and so that I can, continue to live their purpose or help them find their purpose beyond basketball, right? Mean, everyone hangs up their shoes eventually. Most athletes I work with are not going to play college basketball, if anything, not professionally. So I want to make sure I'm equipping them with the tools. So what can I learn from words being magic and creating a curriculum through Project Wonder that I can maybe steal some gold nuggets?
Yeah. No, that's awesome. So you can teach a room of 8 kids how to shoot. The kids that respect you as a human, as a coach, think that you are invested in them, they are going to listen hand over fist more than the kids that aren't even able to meet you in a respectful space, right? The kids that you haven't maybe said, hey, good morning, Alyssa, how are you today? Right? They feel like they're left out. They feel whatever racket they're on. if you can connect with the kid, if you can help them buy into who you are and what you're selling, right? It's all sales. If you can help them connect and buy into what you're selling, they're going to walk away with so much more than the kids that are just there, that they feel like you don't even know their name, right? And are detached. So to be relationship based is something I learned through running a group home. I worked for an amazing organization here in the Central Valley, and I was able to actually train new employees that were going to come and work in a group home. And this was youth that were 7 to 12 years old, and they were the most dangerous. They were group homes. They're not even called group homes anymore. They're called ST. There's a bunch of letters. I'm not there anymore. I don't know. But there used to be levels, and there were like, whatever level, I think it was level 3 or 4, it was like any higher, and they just go to juvenile hall because they're not safe. Like for our safety, for theirs. And so when you train someone who's never worked with that level of danger, lack of safety, then a lot of the training has to do with just crisis intervention. And our program had a physical restraint component that was only 20% of the whole training. 80% was building relationship, learning how to listen for needs over behavior, right? So if I'm lying, like lying's a trigger for me, right? Part of it is learning your triggers. When you work with kids, you should definitely know what triggers you. And so a trigger for me is lying. So if a child is lying, if anyone is lying to you, they are afraid that you're going to reject them. Okay. So if my ears are listening that you're afraid that I'm going to reject you, rather than you think you're smarter than me and you're not, right? Like those are two totally different places to come from. So that's kind of how we break it down. So it starts with knowing your own values and your own triggers. And then you kind of look outward at the youth and active listening and things like that.
Active listening is really important. And I think it's really undervalued. I think a lot of times as coaches, we often just want to get our message across, like if I'm thinking specifically like high school coaching, like, hey, run this play, right? Instead of, kind of getting to know them, connecting with them as soon as they walk in the door. And I think connection is one of the biggest things. And one of the things I try and practice is, dapping everyone up and saying what's up before any practice starts.
Cool.
And I feel wrong when I don't. Like, I feel like I'm leaving people behind. And it sounds like that's a really important part of what you all are doing. And I'm curious, I enjoy the way that you spoke about some of these at-risk youth who maybe, we could use different other words for them, but the way that you chose was like, they are not safe for us. They're not safe for themselves versus, kind of using other choice words. So can you even, kind of dive into just the power of words and how we frame things and maybe how you use them specifically, when you're, speaking life into people, and then also just like talking about real things like, at-risk youth or whatnot?
Something that we preach a lot and that I live, we can all go through imposter syndrome, and God knows I do, teaching what I do. And then when you have bad days, you're like, who are you being, right? But we teach that greatness starts within. Greatness starts within. And so I could not organically or authentically teach these types of mindset if I didn't just continuously work on it myself. I'm constantly reframing things in my mind and speaking on it in a loving way. And that goes back to building relationship first with someone. And then anytime you're given an opportunity, being able to reflect back with them and have that conversation. Like, I hear what you're saying, and it's so frustrating, and it genuinely, pisses me off too. But how are we going to get through it? Because we have to be here for 2 hours, or like, whatever it is. It's like, how are we going to spend these next 2 hours? Right. And so it comes from a genuine place, and just me constantly having to correct myself. I'll look back on these next 5 years someday and probably really laugh and at just the level of stress and like recently I got burned, like in business, like I got burned and like some shady stuff happened to me. from an organization that was a Christian organization. And so like the reframing that had to happen and like, right, of like how I'm going to go about it and who am I going to be in this situation. It's real, man. And I listen to Tony Robbins. Like, I don't care how corny that sounds. It's like, I put that stuff in my ears. I wish I had time, honest to goodness, to read more. I love to read. I've been trying to read Atomic Habits or whatever for, I'm not kidding you, 6 months. It's like 5 pages at a time before I pass out. And I could probably listen to audiobooks, not my style. So it's really just constantly working on myself and trying to be as authentic with what I'm teaching as I can. And I'm sure that I have deterred friends in my life from maybe always being a coach. I know my oldest loves to be like, can you just be my mom right now, Mom? And I'm like, oh, okay. How can I do that? Let me think. I don't know. I'm doing my best.
That's funny. I think that is really important. I think I kind of recognize that sometimes too, where it's like where something happens and like the initial reaction is just to complain. And one thing I've been trying to catch myself with is like, okay, we can only complain for so long. Like we gotta, if I'm going to preach, being a problem solver to my athletes, then I better start doing that myself. So I've had to kind of do my own work with it. And, I listen and read similar things, and I used to be a better reader, but now I'm kind of slowed down quite a bit as well. But with that, like, you're talking about working on yourself a lot. I'm curious if you want to, continue to expand more on how do you reflect in your daily process and make sure that you hold yourself to that, standard, and, holding yourself to greatness starts within, and how do you work on that daily?
Man, that's such a good question because like, I come from a childhood where my parents were like honest, hardworking, like wonderful. And I went through a lot of abuse that I worked really hard to hide from them. So it was a lot of trauma in my childhood. And then my late teens, this eating disorder developed. I became bulimic after I lost weight. And then after a friend of mine was like, oh, you can like get rid of these calories. And I'm like, what? And it was a horrible, horrible nightmare of like, right, all that. Because then I moved to Tennessee and that stress and like feeling like I wasn't good enough. And that was a very unhealthy coaching environment that I was in, that I put myself in with that school and that coach. And so my 20s were filled with like trying to heal and going, like seeing the therapist and seeing the right doctors and like doing the movements, right? Like a robot. And then when I turned 30 and I was a mom already, I had my 2 girls and I was married, and I had to really look. And I had this moment where I was 400 pounds and I couldn't get off of the floor. And I had just experienced a really hurtful moment in like my marriage. And I was just like, okay, literally this is rock bottom. And like, I spent a lot of time as a kid asking God very clearly, like, why is this stuff happening? Because I was struggling to keep it a secret while like my dad was still this cool, like cowboy guy. We had all this cattle. I got to like ride horses. I was like throwing calves. Like, who gets to do that as a kid? It was like such a fun childhood. My mom was a nurse, like whatever, just why is this happening? And I had the capacity as a young kid to be like, okay, this isn't cool. Like, I don't deserve any of this, right? So that moment when I decided to change my life and I took steps, I joined a boot camp that we really couldn't afford. I started going to a Christian church. I never felt connected. The Catholic Portuguese culture is a beautiful culture. I just didn't feel connected. So I started going to church and I started working out, like seriously joined a boot camp. That changed my life. Healing started then. So healing started then. Everything that's come from that, I've been focused on that. And that's mindset has a big thing to do with that. Okay. I tell you all of that to tell you that I have times when I look at where I'm at and I have to be really honest about what eyes I'm seeing it through. Like, let's be realistic. How far have I come today? Where are we really at today? And I have other days where I have to talk to a friend. Like, I need a wall to bounce off of, all of my frustrations, if I feel like I'm not far enough in any area, right? I have to bounce off of people that I trust and that really know my story. And when you are an entrepreneur, especially when you're working in the youth space, you have to be really careful about your moves, but also your moves out loud and in public. I see people go online and sharing things about their frustrations or about their lives or whatnot. And I wish I could coach them. Like, I wish I could give them like advice because you have to be really careful who you trust. But I don't really know some days if I don't really know how neutral, right? My judgment is on myself. Like, I don't know. I know I come from a lot of trauma. I know I know my past. I just know what brings me joy. I know what's healthy for me. So I have goals. I love doing CrossFit. I love CrossFit. When I wanted to, we don't have basketball. We don't have women's basketball leagues out here. I participated over the summer. Yeah. And it makes it, I got to play because of work. I got to play 2 games this summer. And the way I felt, like, if anything, nothing makes me feel like that. But CrossFit comes really close. And I love CrossFit. I don't compete because I am not competitive with the team, right? Like, I need a team. But anyway, I love CrossFit. But that's one way that I can make sure like I'm in a good space, because the way I'm fueling my body, right, shows where I'm at. If I'm just cool with my macros and I'm not stressing out, then I know other areas of my life are like cool. But food and exercise is somewhere where like I can always measure where I'm at with that. In other areas of my life with that, like if I'm being loving and I'm not like, oh, those pants were really tight today, or like, oh, I shouldn't have had that pizza and beer last night, or like whatever. Then I'm like, why am I being so hateful right now on myself? Like, whoa, right? So through my healing, I know where my like if I'm off, if I'm not in a good space, I know where that shows, right? But also I have a few really trusted friends, and you only need a few, maybe 2 trusted friends. And that's only because people are so different. You need those different perspectives.
Right.
But that's how I know. I know how unfair I can be to myself, you know?
Yeah, we are our own worst critics, but I think you bring a lot of wisdom with what you just shared and sharing your story. And kind of what I hear is like you kind of beginning to understand and of course, over time, your priorities, right? What is most important to you, your story, what pieces have really helped fuel you in this journey of Project Wonder and empowering athletes, but also how you show up for those athletes, talking about your macros, my exercise, and, kind of, we got to get a league up there. I mean, 2 games in the summer, that's not enough. That's not enough.
It was talking about magic, like no words needed. It was just like, here we go. And there's nothing like basketball, like being in shape. Like I thought I was in cardio shape, not basketball cardio.
That's why I love, working with the kids, because they keep me in shape, honestly. So
heck yeah.
With that, though, I think it's really important for, all of us as leaders of young people. And you're talking about how we show up as young people or as leaders for our young people in terms of like what we post, like a lot of my athletes, I'm sure, follow me, and I'm sure it's similar for you. So how we show up in the digital world matters a lot for the physical world, and just being that role model. Can you share a little bit more about like how the journey has really helped you find and prioritize, it sounds like your friends, what's most important to you, and how you use those priorities to kind of spend that, limited amount of time, because like you said, you're a mom, you're an entrepreneur, right? And there's only so much time in a day.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. During COVID, I had a lot of medical, I told you I had a lot of medical stuff, and I still, because I was worried about money, I had just started Project Wonder. It was like, 6 October. Yeah, it was just it was like 9 months. I started April. It's like 9 months in, but I became an insurance salesperson. I sold insurance. I don't even know how to say that. And I could probably sell ice to Eskimos, right? Like if I believe in it enough, I don't know. And I thought I would enjoy it. And I didn't. I hated it. I loved the people I worked with. I said this when I left. I said, I love this office. I love you guys. I absolutely hate selling insurance. And the reason for that, my third weekend, I probably listening to Tony Robbins or someone, right? What's that? Gary Vee, somebody. And I wrote my priorities and I stuck them on a Post-it behind my laptop. Nowhere on that priority list was it making calls to sell insurance. And I couldn't get that out of my head. Like nowhere on there. It was, and it's been God, my kids, and Project Wonder. And that's why I've also been single for so long. But it's a choice. And it's also that number one being God is, however that's honestly evolved as I get older. It's just believing that whatever is for me is going to come and show up, and to focus on what's right now in front of me. And that's been awesome, because I'm a person that if you were to tell me that you had Shaquille O'Neal's direct number, I would take it and I'd write it down and I would pray on what that phone call is going to look like, and bet in a week I will have him on the phone, and I'll have a conversation with him. And my point in saying that is to be a person who has absolutely no fear in creating opportunity. Okay. You really have to learn how to focus on what is right in front of you, because it's easy to be like, you know what, this fundraiser, we're hitting a bunch of walls right now, and I could just go create a new fundraiser and get some new people involved, and it's going to be way cooler and it's going to work. So what's really helped me focus on my priorities is, first of all, literally writing things down. I've seen this a couple times, and I'm sure being in the space you're in, you've seen this. They say women's brains, they work like spaghetti, right? Every thought is entwined, every emotion is entwined. And men, they think in waffles. There is a space and a filing cabinet for everything. I'm not even hungry. And this is the analogy I'm giving you. And when you pour syrup in any of the waffles, it stays right there. So when you move on, that syrup's staying right there. It's not going anywhere else. But women, it's everywhere. I've only heard it in a crisis brain, right? And so a crisis brain is spaghetti. And when you write things down, it becomes waffles. You're able to see it. I write down what my priorities are. I write down what my dreams are, and you have to measure them up against each other. Are you appreciating where you're at right now? Because this is where you're at and these are your priorities. And how are these going to fit here? Right. It's really keeping my priorities in order. And if I'm lacking inspiration, it could be a lot of things. It could be my personality type, right? There are a lot of factors involved. I'm pretty ADD, obviously. But I also, more than anything, I respect and appreciate the creativity and inspiration that flows through my brain. And so if you're an analytical person, and we might not have a whole lot to talk about, right? If you're super analytical and super organized, I'm I love who you are and I appreciate you. And people like me need people like you, right? But I have to stand in being so appreciative of how my brain works and operates, because I want to make the most out of that. And again, going back to my faith, I believe I was given all of this to make the most out of it. And so we're just moving forward with Project Wonder, and I have to keep those priorities in order.
I think there's a ton of wisdom there. And I think the theme line I hear running through is just understanding and recognizing our own gifts that we're given, and that our own strengths and how we show up. Right. So in this last, 2 minutes in the fourth quarter of our podcast, I'd love for you to kind of share how, and maybe final words of advice and thoughts for the coaches and parents that are listening to this, to help them recognize their own strengths and help them recognize that their own strengths can help them then connect with their athletes to make a bigger difference and a positive impact.
I love how you wrap that up. Well done. Bravo for that. I love that. little things might seem silly, but like growing up and being a Christian, growing up Catholic, no one wants to talk about like, what's your sign? Don't do that, but I was always amazed at how accurate I'm a Gemini. I was always amazed at how accurate that was. As the adult version of that, and if you're into astrology, don't hate me. Let's say the more studied, I guess, in a scientific way would be, these personality tests. Take the Enneagram, 16personalities.com. That's the Myers-Briggs personality index, I think it's called. But anyway, do something like that. And even if you take it and you're like, that's not me at all, then write a list of what your gifts and what your strengths are. Because again, it's the spaghetti and waffles. Look at where your strengths are. That's a really good place to start. What are your triggers? I have an 8-year-old who is just like me. She triggers me all day because she's just like me. Okay, so my first piece of advice is understand who you are. Like, get really clear on what your personality looks like, what you have to offer. And second of all is slow down. And that's a life lesson that I'm taking. Like you said, and I get your vibe. You walk in, you're giving high fives, and you're like, we got to start drills. It's like O2 or, whatever, right? And it's like, even if you were to take a deep breath and turn around and be like, how's everyone's day? And everyone's just like, whoa, whatever, laugh, be like, same, man, let's go, right? Like, whatever it is, it's to slow down and just give a little bit of yourself. That's all they want is they want like a minute of you. I feel like kids are constantly sharing.
I love that. That's a great way to end the episode, and share that if we just slow down a little bit and just make those little like interactions, right? How are you? It's 30 seconds, 25 seconds, doesn't take much more time. And that's what is really they're going to remember. And that's how we, eventually can teach how to shoot better, but really the life lessons that are,
Totally.
Ingrained in sports, they'll be able to understand and respect us and listen to us more, which then we can have a greater impact. So that relationship is so important. So with that, where can people find and connect with you, and also find, connect, and support Project Wonder?
Thank you. We are on Instagram, Project Wonder Modesto. And then our website is projectwonderyouth.org. And we funnel into that another website that's project-wonder.com, but projectwonderyouth.org. Thank you for your time. This was really, really fun.
Yeah, I know. I appreciate you coming on, and we'll drop those links in the show notes, and we'll talk soon. Alyssa, thank you.
All right. Keep up the good work, man. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Bridging Impact Podcast. We'd love it if you would like, subscribe, leave a comment and a review on whatever platform you're on. It's the best way to help us grow. We appreciate you for doing that. We'll shout you out on social media. I'd also love if you connected with me on social media. Let me know your thoughts. And this is why I do it. I want to share knowledge and wisdom from experienced leaders to people like yourself and myself, so we can have this dialogue and move forward, make an impact on the world. So stay tuned, stay subscribed. Cheers.